My name is Lena Hartwell, and I am 29 years old. My grandmother left her house to both of us equally. That was in her will, her actual, notarized, attorney-drafted will, 50% to my sister Claire, 50% to me. I was living in London when she passed. I trusted my sister to handle the estate paperwork because she was local and because she was my sister and because some things, when you are 23 and grieving and 6 time zones away, you hand to the person you trust most and you believe will be handled correctly. 6 years later, Claire called me to say she was selling Grandma Ruth's house. She said it the way you announce something you have already decided, warm, informational, the tone of someone sharing news rather than asking a question. She said the market was good and she had a buyer lined up and she expected to close within 60 days. I said, "That's great. What's my half going to come out to?" There was a pause. Then she said, "Lena, the house is in my name." I said, "I'm sorry, say that again." She said it again. The house was in her name. Had been for 6 years. There had been a property transfer document, she said, a standard part of estate administration, she said, and it had put the property in her name for simplicity of management. She said I had signed it. She said I had given her permission. I had no memory of signing anything. I had no memory of being told about any property transfer. I had no memory of being asked for my permission. But I had been 23 and grieving and 6 time zones away, and the truth was I had signed things during that period, things Claire had emailed me, things I had printed at a library in Bloomsbury, signed, scanned back, and returned without reading every clause because I was 23 and grieving and I trusted my sister. I told Claire I needed to see the document. She sent it that evening. My signature was on it, or something that looked like my signature. Scanned, slightly blurry in the way that documents scanned in 2018 were slightly blurry, but legible enough to show a signature above a line that read, Lena Marie Hartwell, hereby consents to the transfer of property at 4417 Elm Creek Road, Nashville, Tennessee, to sole ownership of Claire and Hartwell. I stared at that document for a very long time. And the more I stared at it, the more certain I became, not as a legal conclusion, not yet, just as the gut-level knowledge of a person looking at their own handwriting, that I had not written that signature. Tell me where you're watching from right now. Drop your city in the comments, I read every single one. And subscribe to Karma Archives before we go any further. This is a Reddit family drama that took 6 years to surface and 6 months to unwind, and every part of it matters. Now let me take you back to 2018 and a grandmother who trusted both of her granddaughters equally. My grandmother Ruth was a woman of specific and consistent fairness. She had 2 grandchildren, Claire, 3 years older than me, and she had loved us with the deliberate even-handedness of someone who had watched favoritism fracture families and had decided it would not fracture hers. Equal birthday money. Equal Christmas gifts. Equal attention at every holiday table. When she died at 79, she left her estate with the same precision, her savings divided equally between my mother and her brother, and the house, 4417 Elm Creek Road, left equally to Claire and me. I know this because I have the will. I have always had the will. A copy was sent to me by the attorney handling the estate at the time, a man named Howard Glass whose firm had handled my grandmother's affairs for 20 years. The will is specific. The property is to be held jointly, with decisions about sale or transfer requiring agreement from both beneficiaries and proceeds from any sale to be divided equally. Claire and I had discussed this at the time. Briefly by phone, because I was in London and she was in Nashville, and we were both processing loss in different time zones and different ways. She said she would handle the estate administration locally, the utility transfers, the insurance, the property taxes. I said thank you. She said, of course, you're my sister. And then I went back to my life in London and I trusted her, and I did not think about the house for 6 years because trusting people you love means sometimes not checking. In the spring of 2024, I moved back to the United States. A job opportunity in Chicago, a relationship that had run its course in London, the specific pull that sends people home when the decade they spent abroad has taught them everything it was going to teach them. I was 29 and ready to be closer to family, and I arrived back on a Tuesday in March, and by Thursday I was having dinner with Claire in Nashville, and she was warm and funny and exactly the sister I remembered, and I thought, this is good. This is how it should be. She told me about selling the house 2 months after I moved back. May. A Saturday phone call. And the conversation that followed was the one I described in the opening of the story, which I want to return to now with what I know. When she told me the house was in her name, and when she said I had signed the transfer document, she said it in a way that told me something. She was not relaxed when she said it. She was careful. The tone of someone who has rehearsed a sentence many times and is delivering it for the first time and is monitoring the response very closely. I have thought about that tone many times in the months since, and I believe, though I cannot prove this, that she had been waiting to see whether I would simply accept it. Whether I would say, oh, yes, of course, I remember signing that. Whether the 6 years of distance and the blur of grief would make my memory of what I had and had not done uncertain enough to accept her version. It did not. I knew I had not signed that document. Not the way it was described. Not a consent to sole transfer of my grandmother's property. That was not something I would have signed at 23 or at any age without understanding what I was signing, and the email record I had from that period, which I began reviewing the night she sent me the document, did not contain anything that looked like a request to consent to a full property transfer. It contained a request to sign something about utility transitions. An email from Claire in November 2018, 4 months after the estate was opened, that said, hey, I need your signature on some admin paperwork for the house utilities and stuff. Nothing major. Can you sign and send back? Nothing major. I had signed something Claire had sent me and described as utility administrative paperwork. I had not signed a consent to sole ownership transfer. Whether that was the same document or a different one, whether my signature had been applied to something other than what I was told I was signing, was a question that by Saturday evening I had already decided needed an attorney to answer. I called a property attorney on Monday morning. Her name was Diane Walsh, Nashville-based, real estate and estate law, recommended to me by a colleague whose family had navigated an estate dispute 2 years earlier. She had a manner so straightforward it bordered on blunt, which was exactly what I needed. I told her the full situation, the will, the transfer document, the email asking me to sign utility paperwork, my certainty that I had not signed a property transfer consent. She listened without interrupting. She asked 2 questions. Did I have copies of the original will? And did I have the email from 2018 that had included whatever document I had actually signed? I had the will. I went looking for the email immediately after we spoke. It took me 40 minutes to find it. I had moved accounts twice since 2018, and the email was in an archive I had not opened in years. When I found it, it contained 1 PDF attachment. Not multiple documents, 1. I opened it. It was a single-page form titled Utility Account Transfer Authorization with fields for the property address and the names of the utilities to be transferred. It was not a property transfer document. It was exactly what Claire had told me it was, utility administrative paperwork. I forwarded the email to Diane that evening. She called me the following morning. She said, Lena, what you've sent me is consistent with what you described. The document you were asked to sign in 2018 is a utility authorization form. The property transfer document Claire has registered with the county is a different document entirely, and it bears your signature on a page you were never shown and never told existed. I asked what that meant. She said, it means someone forged your signature on a legal document. I need to be careful about using that word before we have forensic confirmation, but the circumstances as you've described them are consistent with a forged signature on a property transfer that should have required your explicit, informed consent under the terms of your grandmother's will. She said we needed 3 things. A forensic document examiner to analyze the signatures, a title search to confirm the exact state of the property registration, and a formal demand letter to Claire to halt any sale proceedings until the ownership question was resolved. I said, do all 3. I want to tell you about the 10 days between Diane's first call and the forensic examiner's report, because those 10 days were the most difficult I had experienced in a long time, and I want to be honest about why. Claire was not a villain in the version of her I had carried for 29 years. She was my older sister. She had been the person I called when things went wrong in London, job problems, relationship problems, the general loneliness of living abroad in your mid-20s that you do not fully admit to anyone who isn't close enough to hear the real version. She had always answered. She had always been warm. She had always been, as far as I knew, my person. The possibility that she had done this, had taken our grandmother's house, had forged my signature, had known for 6 years that she was living with this, was a possibility I had to hold alongside my memory of who she was. And those 2 things did not sit easily in the same mind. I did not call her during those 10 days. I did not reach out. I went to work in Chicago. I exercised. I called my mother, who was not yet aware of any of this, and I had conversations about nothing important because I was not ready to say what I suspected out loud to someone who would then have to sit with it the way I was sitting with it. I held it alone, the way you hold something that has not yet been confirmed and that you cannot yet afford to fully believe. The forensic examiner's report arrived on a Thursday. It was 14 pages. I read it in Diane's office. The conclusion was in the final paragraph, based on comparative analysis of authenticated signature samples provided by the subject and the signature appearing on the property transfer document dated September 14, 2018. It is the opinion of this examiner that the question's signature was not produced by Lena Hartwell. The characteristics of the question's signature differ from the authenticated samples in multiple categories of measurement with a high degree of confidence. I set the report down on Diane's desk. She said, "This is clear. The signature is not yours. We are now in fraud territory." I said, "What do we do?" She said, "We file to void the transfer. We notify the county recorder of the fraudulent filing. We serve Claire with the demand letter we've already drafted. And we file a complaint with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation because document fraud in a property transfer is a criminal matter in this state." I said, "She's my sister." Diane looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "She was your sister when she did this too." She was right. I knew she was right. I just needed to hear it said out loud by someone else before I could fully accept it. Claire called me the day after Diane's demand letter was served. I had been expecting the call. What I had not been prepared for was her opening sentence. She said, "You were never going to come back." I said, "What?" She said, "You were in London. You had a life. You never talked about coming home. The house would have sat there for years, property taxes, maintenance, all of it on me, and you would have just let it sit because you didn't have to think about it. I was the one here. I was the one dealing with all of it." This was the moment I understood something about betrayal that I had not fully understood before. The people who do the wrong thing are rarely at peace with having done it. What they're usually doing, in the years between the wrong thing and the moment it surfaces, is building a case. A reason. A story they tell themselves that makes the wrong thing reasonable, even necessary. Claire had spent 6 years constructing a version of events in which she had not stolen my inheritance. She had managed an asset I had abandoned, and when I had the audacity to come back and claim half of it, the construction collapsed under the weight of what the forensic examiner had found. I let her talk. She talked for 11 minutes. I did not respond to anything she said during those 11 minutes. When she stopped, I said, "Diane Walsh is my attorney. All further communication should go through her." Then I hung up. The legal process took 4 months. The property transfer was voided by the county recorder following receipt of the forensic examiner's report and Diane's legal filing. The title reverted to joint ownership as specified in my grandmother's will, 50% each, exactly as Ruth had intended. Claire's attorney made 2 attempts to negotiate a settlement in which she would buy out my half at a below-market valuation, arguing that her years of managing the property constituted a compensable contribution that should be reflected in the price. Diane responded both times with the same position: fair market value or litigation. Claire's attorney came back with fair market value at the beginning of month 4. I accepted. The settlement also included a clause, one Diane had insisted on, and that Claire had resisted for 2 weeks before her attorney advised her that resisting it further would not help her position, acknowledging that the 2018 property transfer document had been filed without my knowledge or authorization. Not a confession, but an acknowledgement. In writing. Signed by Claire and witnessed. That sentence exists in a legal document. It will exist for as long as documents are kept. My grandmother left her house to both of us equally, and the record now says so. The TBI complaint is still open. I am not going to discuss the status beyond saying it exists and is being handled by people whose job it is to handle it. What I will tell you is that in the months since the settlement, Claire and I have not spoken. Not from anger, exactly, though there is anger, I will not pretend otherwise. But from the specific kind of distance that opens between 2 people when one of them has done something the other cannot explain away, and both of them know it. I think about my grandmother a lot. Ruth, who divided everything equally because she knew what happened when you didn't. Who had watched favoritism fracture families and had decided it would not fracture hers. She could not have known that the precision of her will would become the instrument that protected me, that the specific language she had insisted on, that decisions about the property required agreement from both beneficiaries, would be the legal foundation for everything Diane built. She just wrote it that way because it was fair. Because that was who she was. The house sold 3 months after the settlement. The proceeds were divided exactly as the will specified. My half is in a savings account in my name. I have not decided yet what to do with it. I think about that sometimes, what Ruth would have wanted me to do with my share of the home she had lived in for 40 years. I think she would have wanted me to build something. Something real and lasting, the way she built her life. Quietly, carefully, with attention to who gets what, and in writing. I am working on it. Before I go, I want to say something directly to anyone watching this who is handling a family estate from a distance, living abroad, living out of state, managing grief from far away and trusting someone local to handle the paperwork. Read what you sign. Every page. Every document. Email is not a binding authorization to do whatever the other person needs. It is a record of what you were told you were signing. If what you signed and what was registered are different documents, the record of what you were told is evidence. Keep your emails. Keep your copies of the will. Keep the communications from the estate attorney. Distance is not the same as absence. Being 6 time zones away when your grandmother died did not mean I forfeited my share of what she left me. It meant I trusted someone I should have verified. That trust was exploited. The documentation, the will, the email, the utility form, is what made the exploitation reversible. And if someone asks you to sign something they describe as nothing major, read it. Every time. Even when you are 23 and grieving and 6 time zones away. Especially then. Leave a comment and tell me, have you ever trusted someone with something important during a vulnerable moment and found out later they had used that trust against you? Or has a family member ever tried to rewrite history about something you know you did or did not do? This is a Reddit family drama a lot of people recognize. I read every single comment. Drop it below. Subscribe to Karma Archives. Every day there is a new story. Reddit stories, family betrayal, karma stories, satisfying revenge, real people, real outcomes, narrated daily. This channel exists because justice deserves to be heard. Karma keeps the receipts. Ruth kept her will. And I kept my emails. Subscribe. I'll see you next time.